Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us today for Notes from the Field, Using Universal Design to Assess Aging in Place Opportunities, a SAGE webinar presented by myself, Lauren Keptines, Hannah Richardson, Brett LaFleur, Sydney Tucker, and Mikayla Adkins. As I said, my name is Lauren Keptines, and I am an associate, a senior interior designer, and the research and development coordinator at Studio 65 based in Austin, Texas. Today, I will be monitoring this webinar and am joined and presenting by an excellent team of students. These are students that are all interior design students from the College of Health and Human Sciences at Kansas State University.
Hi, I'm Hannah Richardson, and I'm from Kansas City, Missouri, and I am also studying gerontology here at K-State.
My name is Brett LaFleur, and I am also studying sustainability and psychology from Omaha, Nebraska.
Hi, my name is Mikayla Adkins, and I'm from Shenandoah, Iowa, and I am also studying American Sign Language and Deaf Studies through Gallaudet University.
And my name is Sydney Tucker, and I am also studying art history with a focus in German language here at K-State.
These wonderful students today will share the outcomes from their student-directed post-occupancy evaluation of a co-living home for seniors at Garden Spot Village at New Holland, Pennsylvania. Our team was led by Dr. Majette Kaup, a professor and researcher in the interior design program in the College of Human Sciences at Kansas State University. I myself am a graduate of the same program from Kansas State that the students and Dr. Kaup are from, and joined the team as a practicing professional to mentor the students and to learn from one of the very best in the POE field. And I do want to mention that this POE initiative began with a discussion between Majette and Steve Lindsay, who is the CEO of Garden Spot, at a Environments for Aging conference about 3 years ago. The folks at Garden Spot were wonderful hosts, and we are so extremely grateful to them for their hospitality. For those of you not familiar with SAGE, we are the Society for the Advancement of Gerontological Environments, a membership-based organization representing and promoting collaboration between all disciplines in the senior living industry. SAGE is pleased to present AIA-approved webinars every month. These webinars are free to SAGE members. Please visit sagefederation.org for information on SAGE membership. I think that you'll agree that with the networking, the educational opportunities, conference discounts, and more, it's $95 well spent. You will be muted throughout this webinar session. You will have the option to type in any questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the top of your screen. We will answer those at the conclusion of the session if time allows. Please keep your questions relevant to the topic that is being discussed. SAGE is an AIA-approved provider, and participants in this course are eligible for 1.5 AIA learning units. Please note that you must be registered for and logged into the webinar to receive AIA credit or a certificate of completion. SAGE will report credits earned by course attendees to AIA CES and will provide certificates of completion within 1 week if requested. If you did not enter your member number or request a certificate of completion upon registration, please email Lori at sagefederation.org. The information presented in today's presentation is protected under copyright. Now let's get started. Here is the course description for today's webinar, and the next slide will be the learning objectives. You've likely already read this because you signed up for this webinar, and we have quite a bit of content to cover, so let's continue. This POE project was made possible through funding and generous support of the following sponsors. SAGE invested in this POE project through their commitment to furthering knowledge about environments for older adults. This project carries SAGE's ongoing commitment to POE work in classrooms and engages our emerging professionals. This project was also supported financially through the International Furniture and Design Association in their competitive Adkins Universal Design Grant. This POE is special for a couple of reasons. First, we got to do it right before the pandemic shut everything down. And second, because the POE team is made up of people who are the future of design, students. Today's presentation format mimics the steps the students took in their own experience of the POE project. In part one, we will be introducing you to Garden Spot Village and the Thistledown co-living house that is on its campus. And there it is, there's a photo of that house on the screen. I remember walking up to the house and immediately being drawn in by the warmth and charm of the exterior design. In part two, the team will share with you the process of their POE, which includes their observations and findings. And I should mention that this POE used the format like the one that SAGE POE teams use, and the quality of the students' work really is of a high caliber. Part three will cover one of the highlights of the trip, the design charrette, because it gave the students an opportunity to collaborate with a range of individuals to review the outcomes of the POE and brainstorm new ideas. That section of the presentation will include a summary of that process and the discussions held at the charrette. Part four covers the detailed observations and resulting suggestions for improvements to the design. And we'll end on part five with a bit of what the team sees for the future of co-living. Now I'm going to turn it over to my expert team, and Brett will present part one.
Alrighty, so for part one, we'll begin with a brief overview of the Garden Spot Village community and then dive into the Thistledown co-living house. We'll also discuss some of the key considerations regarding the revolutionary nature of this project and the larger issues it seeks to address. So when this whole project started, we were just sophomores in the interior design program. We had all expressed interest in research and evidence-based design. So when we were introduced to the idea of conducting a student-led POE, we were all ecstatic. Back in the fall of 2019, we started analyzing materials like floor plans and images. We also had meetings with administration and the architects and generally grew our knowledge on co-living, aging in place, universal design, and the POE process. Then when the spring of 2020 came around, we were prepared and ready to visit the site. We as a team were very fortunate enough to travel to Pennsylvania, meet the ladies, and see the home for ourselves in late February, just before the COVID-19 pandemic. Following our visit and leading into the summer, we completed our notes and observations and produced a set of improvements, which led to the development of a white paper to return to administration and architects to consider our suggestions for future iterations of the home. This past year, believe it or not, was dedicated to preparing what we have for you today, and we couldn't be more excited to share it with you all. So as a POE team, we had four major goals. The first goal was to explore the implementation of universal design principles to enhance accessibility and functionality for all users. Providing universal design so that all users could comfortably use the space regardless of their preference or ability was crucial to us as designers. We wanted these co-living residences to be available to any older adult that qualified. The next goal was to identify critical features in the co-living house for successful aging in place as residents' needs change over time. The ability of the residents to safely occupy the co-living houses as long as they were physically able to provide security and stability. These are two things that would be more difficult to achieve if they had to pack up their lives once again due to a home that couldn't accommodate the changing needs that accompany the aging adult. The third goal was to recognize how to apply strategies of evidence-based design to provide objective design decisions that would enhance the overall user experience. Evidence-based design creates the opportunity to learn from and apply tactics that have worked well or even fell short of expectations within similar conditions by studying how humans interact with their built environments. The last goal was to understand the importance of post-occupancy evaluations and their influential role in the evolution of future design iterations. We wanted to really grasp the essence of a POE and how the refinement of an existing design can enhance support for end users within their environments. But now, let's take you to Thistledown. Thistledown Co-Living House seeks to provide affordable housing options for seniors that also support aging in place, advance end user well-being, and contribute to the development of future co-living models around the world. So here's a little context about the location of Thistledown. This co-living house is located at Garden Spot Village. Garden Spot is a non-for-profit continuing care retirement community in New Holland, Pennsylvania that opened in 1996. Garden Spot has dedicated itself to community, excellence, service, stewardship, innovation, and integrity based upon their core religious principles shaped by the residents in the local community. This community is truly one of a kind, and that it supports residents by encouraging resident autonomy and creating diverse social interactions. Garden Spot features various living options centered around the main complex that also houses a wide variety of enriching amenities. These include healthcare services and recreational opportunities that promotes individual well-being and lifestyle preferences. Some of our favorite aspects of the village life that we got to experience were the conservatory and greenhouse, hobby areas, and multiple dining venues. As seen in the proposed site plan on the screen, Thistledown Co-Living House is one of 5 houses planned for this intended community to support aging in place for low-income individuals. The completion of the other 4 houses will include a central green space with walkways that connect the residents, further enhancing the aspect of community that Garden Spot Village embraces. Thistledown provides a residence for 5 unrelated older individuals who share the common spaces, like the kitchen, dining, and living areas, but each are provided a private bedroom and bathroom. The house is unique in that it does not rely on government funding, but utilize local community volunteers and businesses to drastically reduce the overall construction cost and resident living expenses. The design for the home was created through a partnership with our architectural team from SFCS, Garden Spot Leadership, as well as community volunteers. This model has received a lot of attention nationally and has received awards for its efforts toward affordable senior housing. At a larger scale, the co-living model seeks to solve social issues commonly associated with modern-day senior living. These issues include isolation for older adults, aging in place, and limited options for affordable housing. As a result, Garden Spot Village and SFCS architects sought to solve these issues by focusing on 3 things. First, creating an environment that supports the sense of community for 5 unrelated individuals who reside under one roof. Second, applying the universal design principles to accommodate all users. And third, providing a safe, high-quality, affordable housing option for low-income seniors. And now I'll hand it off to Hannah Richardson, who will present lead part 2 of this presentation. Thank you, everyone.
All right, now I get the fun part because I get to bring Thistledown to life for you guys. So for this next section, we will be discussing our experiences when we were on site in Pennsylvania. So what even is a post-occupancy evaluation, you might be wondering. A post-occupancy evaluation is an assessment after the project completion to analyze the effectiveness of the originally identified project goals. In the case of Thistledown House, we were tasked with identifying and evaluating spaces of the home and how they were used by the residents. We were then to decide on successes and potential improvements for future iterations of the co-living model. We started with a focus group of the residents to gain their own perspective on living in the home. And then we moved into our own observations, which we will elaborate on shortly. The final piece of our evaluation was presenting our preliminary findings in a design charrette to the key stakeholders of the project at Garden Spot Village. First, we want to introduce you to the lovely ladies of Thistledown. And so from left to right, we have Ruth D, Esther, Vida, and Ruth K. The 5th lady of Thistledown was Rose, who unfortunately isn't pictured here. But ultimately, we were just so grateful to have the opportunity to meet and learn more about these wonderful ladies who graciously opened up their own home to us. So once getting to Thistledown, we circled up into a focus group to share our initial introductions and begin conversing on what the ladies thought about certain aspects of the home. We had already prepared a list of questions that were organized by specific rooms or the more general areas of the home. These were based on materials that we had reviewed prior to our visit, such as the plans and photos that Brett mentioned earlier, where we identified some design features that we thought might be effective or some that could possibly be improved. Here we have a sample collection of our kitchen and bathroom questions that we asked the residents. For example, in the kitchen area, we asked how the ladies stored their food and whether they did it individually or collaboratively. For the bedroom area, we asked, do you have enough storage for your desired furniture in your bedroom space to suit your need? And we were kind of hinting at the ladies' feelings towards their room's ability to hold their own personal belongings that they brought with them from their previous residence. We found that our original questions fueled further conversation that revealed more insight into the home and how it is ultimately used by the ladies. We documented the ladies' feedback and then additionally used these notes as a guide when we were making observations later when going throughout the home. While we were gathering our notes and compiling a list of questions to ask the residents during our focus group, we made a general list of target points that we knew that we for sure had to touch on while we were there. One of those that was on the top of our list was universal design. Universal design is the design and composition of an environment so that it can be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest extent possible by all people, regardless of their age, size, or ability. An environment, or really any building, product, or service in that environment, should be designed to meet the needs of all people who wish to use it. Universal design is not a special requirement that aims for a select few of the population. It is just a fundamental condition of good design. So if an environment is accessible, usable, convenient, and a pleasure to use, everybody benefits from that. I'm sure many of you who are attending this webinar for SAGE are familiar with the universal design principles, but we wanted just to provide a little brief refresh. The tolerance for error principle strives to minimize hazards and negative consequences of an environment. The perceptible information principle features design that effectively communicates necessary information for all users. The low physical effort principle utilizes design that can be efficiently and comfortable. The equitable use principle includes design that is useful and available for all people with a diverse range of abilities. The simple and intuitive principle provides design that is easy to understand regardless of an individual's background while it's being used. The size and space for approach and use utilizes design that has the appropriate size and space of a design for approaching, reaching, and manipulating any possible user that could interact with it. Then last, but certainly not least, we have the flexibility and use principle that aims to accommodate individual preference as well as ability. This is an example of one of the matrices we made to analyze the existing features of the co-living home. We labeled the different spaces of the home and then listed our observations of features on the left-hand side. Later, we evaluated whether each of these features was positively or negatively contributing to the overall universal design of the space, based on the definition of the principles, as well as the feedback that we received from the residents. This is indicated by a positive or negative symbol on the within the UD principle columns. For example, the first feature listed here is that each resident is provided a key to access each of the 4 entries to the home. This was a positive feature that satisfied not all, the universal design principle 1, equitable use, because each resident having their own key promoted independence across all the residents within the home equally. A personal key also allows them easy access to their own home, regardless of their experience, knowledge, skill level, or even current concentration level, which also satisfies the universal design principle 3, simple and intuitive. So our analysis included 174 total observations throughout the house that correlated to the 7 universal design principles. About half of these observations were categorized as positive features, and about half of them were opportunities that we sought to enhance the universal design for the occupants living within these co-living houses. The results from these matrices were then crafted into recommended improvements for the future co-living models, which we will get onto later. So now it gets to the more fun part of the actual tour of the house. So we would first like you to see the overall floor plan and discuss its characteristics. The floor plan is by the centrally located primary social and community areas of the home that are shared by all residents. This includes areas such as the kitchen, located in the left portion of the yellow area, the living room in the upper middle portion, and the dining room on the bottom area that juts out just a bit. There are also many secondary social and community spaces scattered throughout the house. This includes 2 front porches at the bottom of the plan in green, a private den of the living room towards the right at the bottom, a laundry room, and a guest bath at the center, and then the attached garage to the upper left, as well as a flex space that makes up mostly the entirety of the second level. The private resident suites are all along the 2 main hallways on the first floor, which also separates the 5 rooms into 2 wings of the home. All bedroom and bathrooms are equal in size and features, but slightly differ from each other in layout to aid in creating a suitable composition of the house. Here you can see that those two main hallways and the primary options for entering the home at the circles. Now we would like to walk you through the house with a little bit more of the visual aids, as in photos, to get you really into a feel for the space. So these are the two primary entrances to the home that I introduced you to on the previous slide. The left image features two doors. The one that we're facing head on leads into the garage, and while the other is an exterior door that leads into the driveway and a few additional outdoor parking spaces. These two doors are more commonly used entrances for the residents themselves, since they are closest to their mode of transportation. The right image shows the intended front door for all users of Thistledown, which faces a plot of land where the rest of the community is to be developed. However, without the completion of the rest of the neighborhood, it is mostly just used as an additional front porch for the current residents. Residents and guests are currently using the back door that faces outside to the driveway for entry, since it is the closest to the guest parking options. So moving further into the space from the back by the resident entries, you are greeted with the personal doors of the resident bedrooms. And as you move your way towards the dog in the hallway that creates visible from the main social area by the kitchen and living room. Around the corner from that is the laundry room, conveniently located on the space include a mop sink, shelf storage, the washer and dryer, and a folding counter. Past the laundry room entrance, the photo to the left gives you a view into the kitchen as you stand just past the hallway jog. You can also see the location of the stairs off this main circulation path that is not too far from the primary social spaces, as in the living room and the kitchen areas. So upon reaching the top of the staircase, you are met with a secondary seating area and tables that are used by the residents mostly for crafting activities. They use this space as a more private area to converse with their visitors or as a quiet place to carry out their own favorite hobbies. There was also a closet used mostly by the residents for bulk and seasonal storage, as well as a mechanical closet. When we arrived here, we were able to see, and you can kind of see in this picture too, that one of the women had been working on a quilt. So that was exciting to see how they actually used that space upstairs. And then moving forward, back onto the first floor, the hallway shown previously opens up to the main social and gathering areas of the home. Along this path to the kitchen, there is what we identified as the media center that houses a lot of smaller miscellaneous storage items, as well as the residents' mail once they bring it in from the outside mailboxes. Adjacent to this space is the U-shaped kitchen that circles a central island. There are many storage opportunities within the kitchen through upper and lower cabinets, tall full-size cabinets, and shallower cabinets even located within the island. The residents at the time used labels on shelves or drawers to denote their individual storage, as opposed to a more general non-labeled shared storage option. The areas of the refrigerator were also labeled in this manner to help identify specific storage spaces for each resident. So that was kind of interesting to see that even on each shelf within the refrigerator and in the freezer, the residents had their names as well. The dishwasher is also located below the island to the right of the sink that you see in the photo. And then located off the kitchen is a door that leads out to one of the two front porches at the Thistledown house. The two porches are separated by the extruded facade of the dining room, which helps to create the two specifically defined areas. The porch in the photo on the left is off of the kitchen and wraps around the house a little bit to get even more secluded and private seating area. The porch in the photo on the right is located off of what is to be considered the main entry door that I mentioned earlier, but it also looks out onto the main street in traffic. And then at its left. Also seen, you can kind of tell, is the plot of land that will soon become the rest of the whole co-living community at Thistledown House. So this is just a picture of the extruded dining room that allows for a more spacious area that can accompany all 5 of the residents, as well as their guests, with this use of an expandable table. Usually this table is actually rotated the other way, so it's aligned along the window wall. But we had manipulated the table while we were there in order to eat lunch all together with the women. That means that usually the table and the chairs do not overlap with the carpet transition on the ground that helps define the living area specifically. The dining space is grounded by a chandelier and features the largest window within the home to provide views out onto the community once it is complete. There is also a bench window seat that the residents can use for additional storage or for placing plants on, as we noticed while we were visiting the home. And then this is the open living area that is essentially the central hub of the house. Here there is a variety of seating options that include 7 seats total to accommodate the residents and also their guests that they might have. Along the back wall is built-in storage and a display case that allows the residents to create their own personal feel and space within the living room. It also features a vaulted ceiling, which helps to define the space from its surrounding areas, as well as a fireplace and the TV hanging on the wall above the fireplace. Off the living room is the den, a smaller, more private seating area that can be closed off from the public using sliding barn doors. This space has a lot of natural lighting and is used as a space for lounging predominantly, making puzzles and even looking out onto the street. You can see on the image that on the right that the ladies have put together a puzzle for us. It had Kansas State, our football stadium on it, and they were really excited to show us our work, which was, of course, incredibly sweet and kind. As previously mentioned, all 5 resident bedroom and bathrooms are accessible by the 2 main hallways that branch off of the living room or main social areas. This is an example of one of the residents' bedrooms. This is Vida's room. Each room has a large window with the additional storage, window seat storage located in the seat as well, similar to the dining room. The resident bedrooms are a space where each of the residents have the most opportunity to personalize their environment and bring in their own furniture pieces and decor. Vida actually quilted her own bed covering it features the states birth of all 50 states. So that was sweet because we all are from different states. So we all got to sit there and she helped us pick out where our state bird was. This is just another example of a resident's bedroom and goes to show how each resident can personalize their room differently to maximize on their feeling of comfort and home. For example, the residents are able to paint the rooms to the color of their choosing. Rose, who was the woman who we were not able to show you, had chosen to paint her room bright pink because it was actually the first time that she got to choose the color of her own room before. And then Ruth K, as seen here, packed all of her room full of the beautiful handcrafted furniture work of her husband. Actually, this is Ruth D. I mixed up Ruth's. So we don't have a photo of Ruth K's, but she had packed in all the beautiful woodworking furniture that her late husband had made. So that was really beautiful to see. And this is Ruth D, who's standing in her room and brought in some of her favorite furniture pieces out as well, but also just constant reminders of her family, as you can see on the photo blanket on the bed. But we were ultimately also really appreciative that the ladies welcomed us into their most personal spaces to share some of their most treasured things and their ultimately most private area. Each bedroom has a private bathroom that is also attached. So here's a couple of images showing that ensuite bathroom. On the left, you can see that there is a vanity and closet area that is open to the bedroom. On the right, you can see that there is a private bathroom that contains the toilet and shower, but is accessible through a sliding pocket door. The residents have the ability to personalize these spaces as well. That concludes the tour of the home, and I'll hand it off to Mikayla, who can get more into our findings and the design charrette.
Excuse me, Mikayla. Sorry, before you go on, we're having a bit of connective issues. So I suggest that we both turn our cameras off and then turn them back on for the Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Hannah. So following our focus group and touring the house, we met with key stakeholders in what's called a design charrette to discuss our observations and initial revision proposals. So for those of you that aren't familiar, a design charrette is a collaborative meeting where designers, clients, and other involved members discuss, explore, and generate design ideas. The design charrette took place the day following our focus group and house tour. Participants included a couple of Thistledown residents, including Ruth, Vida, and Esther, Garden Spot Village representatives, Steve Lindsay, the CEO, Jackie Barrios, who's a social worker that works with the ladies, J. Arthur Johnson, who's a retired architect, and Larry Nepper, who was a builder in the project, and SFCS staff Dave McGill, who was an architect, Amy Carpenter, a principal architect, Melissa Pritchard, a managing principal. While many professionals and members were present, the charrette was in fact led by us, the students, and ended up lasting approximately 2.5 hours. Being just sophomores in our program at the time, this was a super rewarding experience for us because in a short amount of time, we really got to showcase our current knowledge and skill sets, all while learning and working with professionals in our field. It helped us gain confidence in ourselves as designers and understand that we really are capable of making a difference in people's lives. One of the best memories from this experience for me was preparing for the charrette in the evening prior. As a team, we gathered, collected our thoughts and ideas, and were really just super excited to be a part of this process. So at the charrette, we started things off by briefly going over our overarching observations, how the focus group with the ladies went, our initial thoughts on the design of the home, and so forth, before really getting into the nitty-gritty. But when we did, we were really glad to have Lauren's help. During the design charrette, Lauren Tynes documented the conversations between all of those in attendance. Later on, these notes helped us better understand how to move forward with the analysis and further develop our recommendations. The observations we reviewed at the charrette consisted of 5 main target points, with focuses on the kitchen, lighting improvements, corridor clearances, designing for 5, the bedrooms and bathrooms, and entries into the home. On the next couple of slides, we'll dive into those in some more detail. As mentioned, one of the things our team focused on was the layout and circulation patterns of the kitchen. We found it to be an interesting subject matter when discussing with the 5 women as they shared one kitchen space. One of the issues our team observed was the clearances within the main circulation areas of the kitchen. As shown in the left image, Hannah is seen with the refrigerator doors fully open to show the clearance between the fridge and island, which hosts the sink, dishwasher, and pull-out trash can. Generally, the clearance between could be more generous, but also the farther the countertop surface is from the fridge, the farther the ladies may have to transition to set down the items they're grabbing out of the fridge. The item we'd more so like to focus on is the overlap of work zones, as it eliminates the ability for multiple women to work simultaneously in this area of the kitchen successfully. To tackle this issue, our kitchen revision is intentional about avoiding overlaps, diminishing opportunities for error, and maximizing size and space for approach and use. In the image to the right, the team is shown with a few of the residents to show just how quickly the kitchen area can fill up and how these work zones may overlap and produce issues and/or frustrations. To further expand on the overlapping of zones, let's take a look at the oven, range, and microwave zone, as well as the freezer and trash pull-out zone. These overlaps can cause serious injuries, such as dropping hot items over a potentially hot stove, pinching your fingers, and/or colliding with others in these circulation areas. As seen in the photo to the left, the microwave placed above the stove is a major safety hazard and imposes reach limitations for the women. Therefore, as a result, an additional microwave was purchased and then placed on the countertop for better accessibility, reach, and ease of use. As for the freezer and trash overlap, these 2 pieces that pull out diminish any ability to walk through the kitchen when both areas are being used. You can also see better here how the fridge's location interferes with the usability of the features located within the island. With a simple layout change, these overlaps can be avoided. Continuing the topic of ease of use, a significant portion of the upper cabinets are beyond standard anthropometric reach for the residents. While this limitation exists, the residents are currently discouraged from using step stools due to policies of the home. This leads to underutilization and reliance on staff for help when needing to access items that are placed there, contradicting the idea of successful aging in place and residents' autonomy. The photo on the left shows this well, as cabinets are installed above the refrigerator, but hardly any items are stored there. The photo on the right shows additional cabinets that are located above the recommended women's anthropometric reach, which is 69 inches maximum. These cabinets are also above surfaces that, as previously mentioned, may be hot, which could lead to serious injury for the residents. Now looking at the island, as you can see, cabinetry surrounds the island, which is really great to make use of as much space as possible, but they really are limited in use due to how shallow they are. As you can see in the image on the right, only a certain size of items can be stored there, and it's not storage space that can be easily divisible among the 5 ladies. Instead of the underutilized shallow storage space, the women would prefer to have an opportunity to sit at the island. These seats could be used for eating, visiting, or support when cooking. This would encourage collaboration, provide an additional eating zone, and provide a place of rest if one feels the need to sit while preparing food or carrying out a particular task within the kitchen. Now that we've talked a little bit about the overall layout of the kitchen and a couple of our initial observations, something else we observed was an opportunity to improve the lighting situation in the kitchen. Lighting in the kitchen is really, really important to avoid errors and provide visual clarity, especially for those aging in place. In this particular kitchen, there are not under cabinet lights present, producing dark shadows. When we took measurements, the foot candles underneath the cabinetry were very low. Under cabinet lighting would help bring that number up to a safer threshold. In addition, ambient lighting could generally be improved by providing a variety of lighting so that the ladies can make adjustments based on their needs and the time of day. As you can see from the image on the right, the main lighting present are above the island and a couple recessed lights within the soffits. Lighting is also imperative to overall well-being. In the main living area, there are large windows that provide a great deal of natural light. While facing north, there was a concern that the women had limited control over the natural light coming through these windows. As you can see, draperies were installed for some degree of control, but the upper windows do not have any. With the living room being adjacent, the light coming through the window seen in the picture produces irritating glares on the TV. We really loved this window, and in thinking about creating a community here and having the ability to see future neighbors walking outside and have a view of the shared green space, this window here really is ideal. Our recommendation is merely to provide a better window treatment to allow the ladies more control and eliminate any glare, since glare causes eye fatigue. Upstairs, there is a large window for natural light as well. What's more of concern here is the variety of color temperatures that are present. The ambient lighting is cooler, whereas the task lighting is warmer. It would be better for these temperatures to be consistent so that the eye does not have to readjust between tasks. And this is a simple change. In the living room, general lighting is not present at all. The large window shown in the first image does allow natural light into the living area, but it does not provide foot candles sufficient enough to carry out certain tasks. When standing in the middle of the room, in the middle of the afternoon, our foot candles reading came out to be 3. For those of you unfamiliar with those types of readings, that is very low. It'd be preferred to have it read at 30 foot candles. This could be improved with the addition of ambient lighting. As you can see, there are coves on either side of the vaulted ceiling with lights provided, but it is indirect light and does not provide enough. Indirect meaning that it shines upward. Especially in the evenings when natural light is no longer shining through those large windows, the lighting that the ladies have to rely on is lamp lighting, which is intended for fixed tasks, not necessarily circulating and maneuvering about the space. Moving on to the corridor clearance issues. There is a prominent jog in the hallway, as Hannah mentioned in our tour at the beginning, that leads from the back door to the main living area. Keep this in mind as I talk about the next point. One of the concerns that was brought to our attention during the focus group was the need for the hallways to be wider. In the case of an emergency where a gurney has to enter the bedroom, the hallways are too narrow to turn and enter where the resident in need is located. This was very concerning to the ladies as they witnessed a friend struggle to get immediate help and more than likely worried about if they were in that situation, if they would get the help they needed as well. This is an example of something we did not anticipate. A lot of the questions we asked the ladies during our focus group were based upon our initial observations simply from studying the floor plans we received before our visit. This, among a couple of other points, were items that were brought to our attention as the discussion carried on with the ladies in that focus group. In addition, for daily use, one of the women uses a walker full-time to support herself as she transitions from space to space. In the event that 2 residents needed this kind of support, there would not be enough room for them to bypass one another in this hallway area. Also, as you approach the living area from the back hallway, there is a clearance issue. From the corner of the wall to the corner of the cabinetry that is present, which is that miscellaneous area that Hannah mentioned, there is only 32 inches. This is not sufficient for comfortable circulation. It also becomes a hazard when navigating the cabinetry edge. This is of concern because it is the main hallway that is used most regularly, and it provides access from the living area to 3 of the 5 resident bedrooms, as well as the back door, which, as mentioned, is the primary entry for the residents. In thinking about groceries being hauled from that back door to the kitchen, this zone may create some complications. In the next iteration, we recommend modifying this configuration to avoid any hazards down the road. Now, in thinking about 5 women sharing this home, we analyzed how well this home was designed to suit them. Particularly in the kitchen, we were curious to find out how they separated their items and if there was enough food storage for refrigerated as well as perishable items. We came to find out that this kitchen is not necessarily designed for intuitive separation of items between residents. Rather than they each being granted their own cupboard or allotted amount of shelving, as Hannah mentioned, they use name labels to identify their personal items, and it's kind of scattered throughout. The ladies have been branched out even from the kitchen to store their food in other areas of the home, like the miscellaneous cabinetry area where they stored their mail. One recommendation we have in the new kitchen iteration, of which you'll see later, introduces the idea of 5 tall cupboards along the wall you see in this image that would allow each resident to have their own space of equal size and configuration, as opposed to scattering their items throughout the kitchen. Additional storage for personal items is provided in the garage, but shelving within the unit is not provided. This leads to the stacking of items, mixing of residence items, and creates a safety hazard when the women attempt to remove the items, especially if they're trying to do so by themselves and if they're specifically trying to access an item from the bottom tier. An easy fix in this case would be the addition of shelving to avoid these complications. Now moving back to the kitchen, we notice a similar issue with the separation of items within the refrigerator, in addition to those for non-perishable items. Items, shelves, and drawers were identified via name tag as well. Generally, this system is a little confusing, but something the women claimed that they adapted to over time. What truly is the issue here is the amount of storage. The refrigerator's capacity does not provide enough space to support 5 individual residents. Something we found out during the focus group is that the women tend to cook on their own, as opposed to a group for the most part. This means they're not sharing majority of their grocery items. To counteract the overflow that they are experiencing, an additional refrigerator and freezer has been placed in the garage. This forces additional unnecessary steps, leading to inefficiency when cooking, and could lead to unnecessary fatigue or even falls when carrying items back and forth. It also separates items as residents' refrigerated goods are in multiple locations. To combat this issue, we recommend that a larger fridge be considered. Similar to the emergency access into the bedrooms from the corridors, another issue we were unaware of that arose during the focus group is privacy for the 2 bedrooms adjacent to the living room. Generally, the residents in these rooms would prefer additional acoustical properties that would absorb sounds being produced in the main living areas, such as the kitchen, living room, and dining room. Additionally, when their doors are open, those sitting in the living room have a sight line into their bedroom and bathroom area. This was of concern to the residents and limits their privacy and ability to leave their door open if they preferred to do so. Each bedroom and bathroom configuration is provided with a window seat. In the original build, the window seat was one long board. The length of the bench created a weight that was challenging for the women to lift on their own and became a safety hazard if they were to drop the lid on their fingers. After the issue was brought to the staff's attention, the board was then cut into 2 pieces to create multiple sections. This was an improvement that we recommend using in future iterations. Each bedroom and bathroom configuration is also provided a private closet that is accessible from the sink area that Hannah showed in the tour. One issue this location creates is what's called a blind corner, or a corner that is not accessible. As you can see from the image on the right, this limited access makes for lost storage opportunities. A quick fix would be the addition of horizontal shelving in that corner. There are, however, some other iterations that we have explored and will show you shortly. Moving on to the entries. One of the most interesting challenges with the house is which door is appropriate to use. On the front facade, as you can see in this image, there are 2 entries. One leads to the designated entry area with a coat closet, and the other leads into the kitchen. As the residents have guests come to visit, how are they to know which one to approach? One of the solutions we gathered was relocating the door that enters into the kitchen from the front to the side of the house. That small change then creates a secondary entry that is considered more private for the residents and eliminates the concern of guests not knowing which door to enter. One issue that is of immediate concern are the thresholds at those front entries. While the back door is most prominently used, the front doors do allow the residents access to the porches where they enjoy drinking coffee, watching cars drive by, or just getting some fresh air. To avoid a tripping hazard, this is one issue that should be remedied as soon as possible. A similar concern applies at the back door. Here, the threshold is sloped, but it is at a sharp incline. For those using a walker or potentially in a wheelchair, this may be challenging to properly navigate. And that concludes some of our initial observations through our focus group that we outlined in our design charrette. And with that, I'll be handing it over to Sydney to go through our big analysis.
All right, yes, my name is Sydney, and I will be taking us through our observations and suggestions for improvement in part 4. So after collecting our data from the home and discussing the next steps at the charrette, we were able to develop our overall analysis of the space and how we can begin to develop our suggestions for improvement. So in this section overall, we will discuss the more analytical components of the post-occupancy evaluation, including detailed observations and our suggestions as the community prepares for the construction of additional co-living houses. So after visiting Thistledown, we then focused on organizing our observations, field notes, and design charrette information by developing a series of matrices organized by each area of the home, which we briefly talked about earlier in the presentation. So each of these matrices helped identify whether or not the observations were positive or negative in their contribution to the universal design of the space. We believe the matrix method was the most effective tool for organizing and interpreting our data that we gathered up to this point. For example, in this matrices, we observed the second floor and the observations we saw while at Thistledown. So one example being the last item on the list stating, bulk storage for large items is located on the second floor, which creates a potential hazard when transporting these items up and down the stairs. So this was a negative observation for Universal Design Principle 2, 5, and 6, which you can see with the minus signs in each. We then assessed the positive and negative observations into another set of matrices, which can be seen on the next slide, which allowed us to create our own improvements in response to each negative within this matrix and how we can improve these aspects regarding universal design. After we observed all of the negative aspects of the home in regard to universal design, we were then able to address these issues within an improvement matrix and determine what universal design principle it would best benefit as seen here. So the matrix specifically shows improvements for the second floor and how our solutions would further benefit the residents. So for example, in connection to the previous slide, the last line of the matrix addresses the bulk storage items stating, provide storage needed for items used upstairs, but relocate shared bulk storage for items used on the main floor to the main floor. So this would then benefit Universal Design Principles 2, 5, and 6, while the original layout negatively impacted Universal Design Principles 2, 5, and 6. So this matrix overall was the most effective way to create solutions and understand their benefits to positively impact the current and future residents of Garden Spot. So once we developed our improvement matrices, we then created a list of improvements that could then be broken down by space and priority. We organized these improvements by levels of priority, high in red represented by A, medium in yellow represented by B, and low in green represented by C. So the highest priority items pertain to having the biggest impact and the lowest priority having the smallest impact respectively. However, all recommendations focus on improving resident health, safety, and well-being to various degrees. Additionally, cost and ease of implementation was also considered. We recommended the incorporation of as many of these high priority improvements as possible in the next co-living house to achieve a more cohesive, universally designed solution. A complete list of these recommendations is also presented in our white paper, and that is available on the SAGE website. So to better explain this process, here we have provided an example of how the recommendations are divided by priority, this being the second floor space. Again, A in red indicates high priority improvement, B in yellow indicates medium priority, and C in green indicates low priority. So the high priorities for the second floor was to move the bulk storage area to the main floor. This was a high priority due to the safety concern for the residents, as they would have to move heavy items up and down the stairs. The first medium improvement was to add a half bathroom to the second floor to enhance the ease of use of this space so that residents and/or guests can avoid going up and down stairs to use the restroom. The second medium priority was to incorporate a Murphy bed with storage that is able to fold down in the space and fold up when it is not being used. This suggestion was discussed during the design charrette and was considered within the final improvements for guests when they visit Thistledown. The medium priorities enhance the space, however, they are not crucial to resident health or safety. The low priority improvement for the space was to increase lighting options and quality for the residents. As stated previously, there was a variety of color temperatures being used in the second floor area. So this improvement predominantly affects the aesthetics of the space and has little concern with resident health and safety. When considering ways the kitchen could be adapted to enhance resident usability and satisfaction, we reflected on the topics discussed during the charrette and our priority improvement list for the kitchen. To respond to the highest priority category, we decided that changing the layout slightly could improve efficiency for all users. As seen above, we suggested relocating the porch door from the front facade to the west wall to create a defined front entry and direct circulation path within the kitchen. This allowed us to move the refrigerator to the west wall where it would not conflict with any other cabinetry or appliances. The refrigerator could then be 48 inches wide and store all resident items in the kitchen only and eliminate additional appliance usage in the garage. By eliminating appliance overlap, this allowed for a wall-mounted oven and microwave at the end of the cabinetry along the south wall, getting rid of the need for an additional microwave on the counter. It also prevents the range, microwave, and oven from being stacked in one area, which was creating conflict when multiple residents use the kitchen simultaneously. Additionally, the sink, dishwasher, and range are all placed with no appliance usage overlap. So the residents also expressed that having seating at the island would be preferred over additional shallow storage, resulting in the proposed layout that includes seating for 3. Finally, the proposed layout provides an open space at the far right side of the island next to the 3 chairs that allows for a movable cart to transport groceries and other items from the back door to the kitchen. While we spoke to the residents of the home and gathered information from the charrette, we were able to take all of the feedback regarding the kitchen and begin to visualize what this space could look like. We were able to incorporate our improvements for the home and understand how the space could evolve and provide a beautiful and functional solution for the residents' kitchen issues. This kitchen rendering overall depicts how we would envision the next iterations for the co-living homes to look and how we specifically address a few priority items. Our team had a lot of fun envisioning what the women had in mind and creating a graphic foreshadowing of what we would see the space looking like. First, we responded to the appliance recommendation for a new microwave location. We placed the new microwave at typical standing height for easy reach and accessibility. Next, we implemented under cabinet lighting to diminish dark shadows that were present on the counter while cooking to reduce the risk of injury due to low lighting levels. Next, a large refrigerator was implemented to combat the food storage issue and eliminate any need for additional refrigerator or freezer in the garage, as well as allow for all users to have their own areas for food within the refrigerator. Then, due to the residents having to often lay towels or washcloths on the counter before placing coffee mugs, plates, and other things on the counter, we wanted to provide a solution for these loud countertops. We have provided the suggestion of paper stone countertops that will better absorb sounds and eliminate loud noises that previously disturbed residents, especially those sleeping adjacent to the main living areas. Paper stone is created from 100% post-consumer recycled paper and petroleum-free resin that would easily absorb noise from everyday kitchen activities. Next, at the island, in addition to providing seating for eating and food prep, we provided a small area below the island for a mobile rolling cart. The residents mentioned fatigue that is typically caused from transporting heavy groceries and other items from the garage to the kitchen. Therefore, the cart is an easy accessible location when the residents need assistance from transporting their items. Then we designed full height cabinetry for a space specifically designed to 5 users so that every user has their own areas. By allotting for 5 residents in specific, this makes every user feel personally designed for and provides completely functional storage space in the kitchen. Lastly, you'll notice we were able to accomplish the successful layout due to the second entry door that was moved from the front facade to the side of the home to eliminate confusion and give the residents a more private porch area. Within the bedroom and bathrooms, we designed each bedroom configuration differently to show how we explored different design options that can easily be applied to the other units of the home as well. So the first unit represents the original configuration of the home. We particularly noticed the blind corner created an issue for the residents to reach into the back of the closet, impacting the overall functionality of the closet. So furthermore, the original configuration in the units off of the living area have sight lines directly into the bathroom areas. Therefore, we specifically looked at addressing this as well in some configurations. So in configuration 1, we addressed the blind corner by simply adding additional shelving, making the storage more accessible to the residents. This is the simplest and most cost-efficient configuration. But in configuration 2, we created a solution that analyzed repositioning the closet from within the bathroom area to the bedroom. This would allow for a closet off the bathroom, which would eliminate sight lines from living areas to the bedroom, as well as a larger closet and a linen area next to the vanity. However, this solution slightly diminishes the bedroom area, but is still very functional. Moving to configuration 3, the wall C has been extended to allow for a functional wall surface area within the bedroom where pictures or TVs could be hung. So this area creates a larger walk-in style closet that is separate from the bathroom area and slightly closed off from the bedroom area. This allows for more accessibility and storage opportunities. However, the bathroom is slightly reduced in size. In comparison, configuration 4 features a walk-in closet that is still separate from the bathroom area, yet the closet is more open to the bedroom. The bathroom is equipped with a pocket door to again eliminate sight lines from the living areas and is generous in size with a larger shower and larger vanity space, with the only compromise of a slightly smaller closet area. Again, these options are shown in different units within the home, but could easily be planned within any of the units at Thistledown. So as stated in the first part of the presentation, one of the primary goals for the Thistledown co-living house was to create a cost-effective living option for aging users. As we took observations from the design charrette and post-visit analysis, making budget-conscious changes that would maximize universal design was one of our primary goals as the POE team. In the original floor plan, the summation of the first and second floors gross square footage was 4,337 square feet. At $90 per square foot at the time of construction, the total cost of Thistledown was $389,354. With all of our recommended improvements and design modifications, the first and second floor square footage came out to 4,447 square feet, our design only adding 110 square feet more. So at $90 per square foot at the time of construction, our design would total up to $400,230. So for only a small difference, the space would be more universally designed and particularly focused further on the health, well-being, and comfort of the current users and future residents of Garden Spot. And I will turn it back over to Lauren for the forthcomings.
Thank you, Sydney. How wonderful is it to have all these bright and thoughtful designers present today? These students are in the wings and they will soon take center stage of their career. They've completed an indicative lettable SAGE POE, which is no small feat, and have demonstrated evidence-based problem solving in their designs. As a team, we've introduced you to Garden Spot Village and Thistledown House, the work that SFCS and the stakeholder team has accomplished, our POE process, the subsequential analysis, and even a bonus of the alternate design solutions the student developed in some key areas. What's next? Well, now we'd like to share our thoughts on the future of co-living and have an open discussion with all of you at the end of this section in our Q&A. When we visited Thistledown in early February of 2020, Garden Spot Village was anticipating the construction of 4 additional co-living houses to create a small neighborhood within Garden Spot. However, because of the pandemic, the design and construction of these homes were put on hold for the foreseeable future. Despite the pandemic, though, the goal remains in place. This future neighborhood has the potential to create a community that uses the idea of co-living to provide great value for their residents. It provides safe, affordable spaces for older adults to age in place while creating meaningful connections. With the incorporation of universal design in the design process, the spaces maximize user comfort and usability as they age in these spaces. We look forward to the future and seeing this goal that Garden Spot has come to fruition. I can even visualize now the residents walking in the future courtyard shown on the screen. The success of Thistledown House paints a picture of bright possibilities. And I think you could hear that in the students as they presented their content today. In our conversations with the ladies of the house, we heard their real stories that seem to weave a tapestry of their collective experiences. This image of myself, the students, and the ladies on the screen really warms my heart because it captured a moment in time when 5 strangers opened their home to my team to not just observe their home and interview them, but to also learn from their stories and their experiences. It led us to think further to the possibilities of co-living and why it works well. We see great benefits in this model for seniors. It has the opportunity to create community, minimize isolation, and increase access to aging in place opportunities for older adults. Co-living provides a creation of community. This model is unique because it consists of unrelated individuals that have not previously lived together and puts them in a residential setting. This gives them an opportunity to build social relationships and gain a support system. Community generally gives people a feeling of fellowship with others because of the commonality of living in the same house. From a senior living lens, the benefit could mean that an individual has a community of people that can support each other both socially and sometimes physically, amongst other things based on the group's commonalities. For example, at Thistledown, we saw the ladies watch out for each other. They recognized when someone needed an extra hand, and they respected each other's needs. There is also a safety in numbers, and perhaps that comes to mind because I've watched way too many competitive reality TV game shows when I was home last year. But in all seriousness, living alone can be dangerous for many older adults. In co-living, imagine if someone fell and how one of their housemates could get help for them sooner than if that person lived alone. Or it could mean your housemate realizing that something might be off with you, leading to a realization that maybe your medication is off. Being surrounded by others can make a difference in people's lives. Co-living also minimizes isolation. In my own early 20s, I lived in various co-living environments, and one of the greatest benefits was that most of the time, I had someone to socialize with at home, whether I liked it or not. I escaped isolation because I had them. Older adults could see the same benefits as I did. As most of you are aware, loneliness is an epidemic among older adults in the United States. Isolation can significantly increase the risk of premature death, dementia, depression, among other health conditions. One of the wonderful things that we saw in Thistledown House was the social engagement due to the design decisions that the team made and the impact it had on the environment. Having larger gathering spaces only outside of the private rooms made it more likely for people to connect. In contrast, if a living space and kitchen had been provided in each unit, people would less likely gather outside of their private rooms, negating the chance social moments while making dinner, watching television, or working on a craft. Co-living could increase safe aging in place opportunities for individuals as well. If done properly, aging in place can allow an older adult to remain in a supportive environment for a longer amount of time. And it can allow for them to hold on to their a higher level of autonomy that most people hold on to for as long as they can. There are expensive costs related to premature institutionalization because of the small things that many of you are familiar with. Those small things could include a trip over a flooring transition that isn't seamless, or a chair that isn't properly designed, that doesn't allow an older adult to get to go through the easy up and down motion, or even having, or the situation of not having the right placement of grab bars in a home can be detrimental. And by the way, the images on the screen that are on the right hand side of the screen are good examples of the scenarios that I mentioned. As we've reviewed this co-living model, it addresses the creation of community, the minimalization of isolation, and aging in place opportunities, which are all beneficial to older adults. And we really do see a great potential for growth. As an industry, we need to continue exploring new and innovative solutions to cover the overall aging population's needs. The model we review today is a solution that meets the need from an affordability standpoint, which is great because there is a big gap in the market. And on a broader level, the benefits we see in this model is also for those who want another option outside what is currently in their market. Our hope centers around Thistledown House and that its success drives design innovation in senior living on a national and even an international level. And if you want to dig further into co-living, we do have some additional resources that can be provided. This POE project was made possible through funding and generous support from SAGE, IFDA, and Studio 65. And we'd also like to extend our thanks to the women of Thistledown House for inviting us into their home and showing us what a successful co-living experience looks like. A big thank you to Steve Lindsay and the residents and staff at Garden Spot Village for hosting us during our visit. And thank you to the architectural professionals at SFCS for their participation in the pre-site visit planning and the design charrette. And thank you so much, everyone. This concludes the AIA CES education portion of the course, but we're not done yet. We have a few minutes to go through any questions you may have, and you should see the Q&A button in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. So just click on that to type in your question. And while you're all thinking about the questions that you'd like to ask the students and the rest of the team, I'll be participating in the Q&A, and we'll also be joined by the leader of our team, Dr. Majette Kaup. But while you're thinking about your questions, if you're curious of how to gain access to the content shared today, the recording of this webinar and the white paper and the resources that we just shared and showed you will be sent out within a day or two. And earlier at the beginning of this section, I asked what's next. And I very simply put, I think it's all up to us. It's up to me. It's up to those of you that have joined us in the webinar. And it's up to the community of us who worked for the greater good of pushing this industry forward. And we can all make an impact. And I encourage each of you to share one takeaway from this webinar that you know, with someone that you know. So now we would like to hear from you. So let me go ahead and pull up the Q&A session. Hi, Majette. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here with all of you.
Okay, so the first question that we have is what gerontology interior design course did you take? And I think that one is geared towards you, Hannah. So can you take that one?
I haven't taken a class that specifically ties the two together, but luckily it's a secondary major, and so it's separate from our interior design program. It just has crossover with classes that also satisfy our degree requirements for interior design. So it starts off with an introduction to gerontology course, and then from there you get to pick the elective courses that you choose to fit with. So I've also taken some human development through aging classes as well, and then currently I'm working on a research paper for one of our classes in interior design that also meshes the two together.
Okay, thank you. The next question that we have is, are any of the future planned co-living housing on this campus planned to allow for aging in place through the phase of needing skilled nursing? And do residents need to relocate when skilled nursing is required?
So, Steve, Lindsay, are you on the webinar today? I want to give Steve the first chance to maybe answer that question. Not seeing anything pop up. So I'm gonna give you a little sense of what we currently know. Again, COVID's really changed the game for a lot of things, but currently the co-living model at Garden Spot, if a resident does find themselves in need of that level of care, again, because it's not licensed for skilled nursing, the likelihood is if that's a long-term need, they would have to relocate. But again, our models are changing, and home and community-based services are definitely becoming more active and taking care into the home. And so we could see co-living models like this one be able to be more responsive, but ultimately, obviously, it's about the total health and safety of the resident and making sure that their care needs absolutely can be delivered in a way that does keep them healthy and safe. So that is, at this current time, my understanding is that if a resident did find themselves needing that level of long-term skilled care, relocation, unfortunately, would be expected.
Let's see. Okay, next question. How can the public benefit from the Universal Design Principles metric and support to evaluate and help modifications to senior homes for aging in place, which is becoming more desirable?
Short answer, read our white paper.
Yes, the white paper is packed with really great information on how the metric was created by the students and the outcomes of the POE and how it can be beneficial.
Besides the metric as well, I think thinking overall about how we can retrofit existing spaces with a range of simple to complex modifications can really enhance universal design. I think that's one thing that we really explored a lot in this project, is the fact that you don't need to necessarily build an entirely new house to really change the way that people engage with their environments and have them have their environments support them as they age in place.
Okay, one more question. Okay, with Thistledown House and future projects surrounding co-living, what do you think is the most important part of the overall aesthetics to the residents? Maybe we'll make that a two-part question. We'll cover aesthetics and then maybe function too.
Honestly, to start off, the residents, considering the fact that most of them come from low income situations, they are just so grateful to have a space that they can even claim as their own. So aesthetics is not necessarily a huge factor to them. Like I said, they're just so glad to have a space of their own, but also to share it with others and have that sense of community that they maybe have not been able to experience previously. So even in speaking with the residents about the aesthetics, they thought the home was great. They thought it was lovely. They had nothing but wonderful things to say. In fact, during our focus group, we really had to push their buttons to try to get any sort of criticism out of them because they truly did love the home and they were just so thankful to be there. So really aesthetics wasn't a huge consideration when we were going through and analyzing based on universal design. It was more about the functionality and whether the design truly did support aging in place for the residents currently living there.
I will add that one of the things that I found to be really intriguing was the issue they brought up about the acoustics in the kitchen and setting cups and plates on the engineered stone surface, which was beautiful. I mean, that was a gorgeous granite type countertop. But, you know, they're like, oh, it's just so noisy, you know, and we put down dish towels so we don't, you know, one of us is up in the morning at 6 getting coffee, we don't wake someone up. And I think we were all just a little surprised by that, which is why we were looking for alternative materials that were affordable, sustainable, and still beautiful. When we found the paper stone, we really thought that might be an appropriate, aesthetically compatible type of choice that would help manage that acoustic reverberation that they brought up. But I will just tell you, for me, that was kind of one of my like, oh, wow, I wouldn't have expected that.
I know, and I will never set a coffee cup on a counter again without thinking of what kind of noise I'm making. Anything from the functionality side that you think is important to the residents? What was maybe some of their favorite parts of the house that they felt were supportive?
I think keeping the laundry on the lower level was especially helpful, and just from a day-to-day or week-to-week standpoint. But also it was interesting to find out that the addition of the second level wasn't intended in the original plan. So originally everything was all on the first level. So that required some thought when we were thinking about if that could be utilized again in additional houses or if it was worth it, but the residents liked it. But also functionality of the kitchen was probably one of the more important things. And that's why we chose to really hit hard on that, because it was one of the areas that is most used by all residents daily throughout their interactions, and that they used together even when in actions separate from each other.
I would agree. I think the data that you collected or that we collected right on site also supported that the kitchen was a big component of this house and the functionality design. Okay.
Key to the functionality was the idea behind having separate private bedroom and bathroom areas that were different from the social spaces, so the kitchen, living, and dining spaces. So that was imperative to the functionality of the home in meeting the goals of Garden Spot to have a community-focused home, but also allow the residents some sort of privacy within a co-living model, especially.
And I think
Mikayla,
from a higher,
go ahead.
sorry, I think from a higher level perspective too, functionality is really interesting as a designer because we always look at floor plans and expect people to behave a certain way. And there's always these contradictions to how people actually behave in a space. And I think that's something that's so valuable about post-occupancy evaluations, is to determine and kind of evaluate how people actually utilize their space versus what the design intention was.
And I think this is an important point that Mikayla is also bringing up with regard to the individual resident space, because there was discussion initially about should those individual resident areas have their own kitchenette in them. And that is one of the things that really kind of divides co-housing from co-living. And one of the goals for this project was to foster community. And so that kitchen, as the students have astutely just identified, became a real synergy for the ladies. And that's one of the reasons was they were looking at the functional aspects of it. They wanted to maximize on the capacity of that space to allow for that sort of community interaction in a way that made the functional components feel really effective, so that it was really desirable location. But For those of you who might be thinking, I wonder if, the individual rooms should be more like apartments. That was something that was discussed early on in the planning with the architects and the community members. And it was abandoned because of that particular goal. But there are other models that do create more like little individual apartment suites. And then there are other shared social spaces that just didn't fit with the mission of this particular project.
Okay, well, I think that covers all of the questions that we have today.
Oops, I
if-
see one more. I do see one more. Scroll down. Rudy
One more?
Friesen has asked.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you. Yes. So having only one entrance visible to visitors is a good recommendation, but they recommend that it be emphasized just a little bit more. An entry that says an entry is important. The student team, would you like to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, so that was definitely the thought that we had as well. Ideally, because initially, when we looked at the house facade, we realized that those two doors, we weren't sure before even going to the house, which one is the front door. And so we really wanted to focus on having one door, but you're right, it would be ideal to have it in a location where it really screams, this is your entry. So that it can be very perceptible to all people. But in order to do that, would be modifying the dining location, which is where that jut out is, and allotting that space instead to entry. And it just didn't fit quite as well with our initial planning and keeping costs in mind and the additional square footage that would be required if we wanted to make the front door extremely visible and attractive as a front entry. It's not something that can't happen, of course. It would have just taken maybe a little bit more money and a little bit more square footage, or even from the aesthetic standpoint, maybe some sort of cue that would tell you also.
Something else that will help is that as the community continues to be built, there will be pathways that connect the homes through a central green space. So I think that that sidewalk or pathway is going to kind of initiate that cue that Hannah sort of touched on, that the sidewalk will help guide you toward that front entry that makes that initial impact, that this is the entry that I am supposed to enter in and this is appropriate.
Okay, we got two more questions in. The question is in regards to housekeeping. So what happens if one or more resident becomes physically unable to share in the chores, such as sweeping, mopping, or vacuuming in common spaces?
I think that plays into the community aspect. As the residents live there for a longer period of time, they become more accustomed to what somebody prefers, what different ability ranges are. And that sense of community really allows them to decipher who kind of takes on what. And we noticed in speaking with the ladies that Ruth D, we pictured her bedroom and you saw her in the images. She was kind of considered the group leader. So when we were initially getting there for our focus group and everything, she was kind of leading us through everything, whereas the other women were more quiet. And so Ruth, being the leader, kind of tries to help facilitate those types of conversations and initiate, well, what are you most comfortable with? What do you want to take on? And that community is a huge piece of that.
Yeah, I would agree. We also observed different functional capacities and physical abilities amongst the different residents. And they all recognize that everybody has strengths and limitations, and they cooperate on that, which kind of leads to that next question. Lauren?
Yes, and so the question is has there been any investigation as to how multiple genders may impact the community?
Absolutely. So the resident that Mikayla was speaking to you about, who actually had to be removed via ambulance and gurney inside the house, was actually a male. The first 5 residents was 1 male and 4 females. And so that was really interesting that Steve kind of got to enlighten us on, because we, of course, weren't there at the time when that man was living there. But it did make for a different community structure in the way that Initially, he expected that he wasn't going to do chores and that was the women's job of the house. And so eventually, with the help of Jackie, the social worker, I think, and just having the community talk between the women, they will determine that you kind of have to pull your weight. This isn't just us cooking and cleaning around here. So it really does go back to its own community and how it's kind of its own ecosystem with the residents living there. And that it was made for both genders, and that having the private and lockable doors really added into that so that it could be either or.
And even during the design charrette, there was a member of the community that was very steadfast about us also not just saying the ladies and having us also like consider men in our future design considerations for the home. And so that was something that also sort of shifted our perspective as we thought about proposing design improvements for the next iterations of the house.
The other thing, which I'm sure Professor Kaut can jump in on, or if Steve Lindsay is here, is the whole process of how the residents are quote unquote selected to live there. There's a certain process that they go through to make sure that those living there are in fact compatible to be together. So it's not just a free for all, well, you can live here because there's an open spot. There really is a process in place that makes sure that the residents are going to be able to live together comfortably and create that community that was so imperative to their mission, as Professor Kaut mentioned earlier.
And if Steve was here, he could speak just a little bit more to that selection process. But one of the things that Garden Spot was able to do was they were able to make this co-living project happen without using the government structure for HUD requirements, which would have put some additional restrictions and kind of rules on how residents who hit a certain income level were selected. But because they were able to actually find the funding to put this together without those restrictions, they are able to do, what the students are talking about, and that is have an application process that does look at income and need, but also takes into account kind of the other social factors that would create a good harmony in the house. And so that I think is really instrumental to making this co-living project work.
Okay, well, I have not seen any additional questions come through. So as a reminder, the recording of this webinar, the white paper of this project, the references that we showed earlier in the presentation will be sent out within a day or two. And that wraps it up for the presentation and today's session. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you, Hannah, Brett, Mikayla, and Sydney for sharing such valuable information and insights. And thank you again, Majette, for joining us for the Q&A session. At the conclusion of the webinar, you will be prompted to fill out a quick survey. So please provide comments or suggestions that can help us continue to provide interesting and worthwhile webinars. We hope that you can join us on an upcoming webinar. And on behalf of SAGE, thank you so much for joining. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining.